We're a group of Gen Xers who became aware of our neurodiversity later in life. Join us as we share stories, interesting topics, and talk to special guests. Welcome to Season 2 of This Is How My Brain Works. All right, everyone, welcome back to This Is How My Brain Works. We are in Season 2, and this has been very exciting for us. I am joined by Krista Gano, Jason Rudofsky, and Sarah Hines are on assignment. So we just have the two of us today, and as we normally do before we hit record, we just chit chat in general, catch up, reconnect, and we also just, a lot of times through those conversations come interesting things, which leads to what we'd like to talk about today. So this comes from the National Health Service UK website. So it's nhs.uk. And I read this sentence and it was just interesting to me. The title of this section on their website says Ways to Cope for Parents of Children with ADHD. And it just talks about, caring for a child with ADHD can be challenging. And here's the sentence that we're keying in on today. It says, the impulsive, fearless, and chaotic behaviors typical of ADHD can make everyday activities exhausting and stressful. There were some things that stood out to me and some things that stood out to Krista. And it's just interesting. I keyed in on the word fearless.
Clearly a neurotypical wrote that.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's start there.
Let's first order of business is to, I think that's a really good point. I keyed in on the word fearless because I just thought that was an interesting word to choose. And it can be, as I mentioned, like fearless, it can be like with impulsivity, you do get this rush in all the things that will activate you. And I think after the fact, you could have regret, like, oh man, I let my impulsivity get the best of me. I shouldn't have, eaten an entire pint of ice cream. Or it could be like fearless could be like also like courageous. Like, I'm so glad that I decided to get up and give that toast because it meant so much to that person, and I feel good about doing that. So it's like in that case, fearless. So fearless can be, it's like this. It can go either way. But Krista, you had
well, it's so funny because I hear fearless and I hear nothing but good. I mean, yeah. I really do. But I also, because I think everything that is so much of what we appreciate and love about our world today started with the seed of fearlessness. So I don't like, for me, and I think started probably in the hands of a neurodivergent, and we just didn't know. And and so I think the thing that really stuck out for me on this was one of the reasons why I think it can be really exhausting. Listen, sure, working with somebody who's on the spectrum in some way, whether it's ADHD, autism, anywhere in between, sensory stuff, whatever it is, it's exhausting to a neurotypical because they don't understand and they think that you should be doing something different. So there's that. But then I think for those of us, I would say if you're in a family with someone with ADHD, the chances that someone else in that family is not also ADHD is probably slim to none. So right. Then is the exhaustion just because everybody's energy is swirling around one another in a way that is, a lot. It's just a lot. So, and I find that being in a neurospicy house, that if everybody's having a day where something has gone off, this is a energy swirl of a home, right? Like there is a lot going on. But so I guess where I got hooked on that a little bit when you first read it to me is why we are always talking about this as if it's negative. as all of the negatives. Like, we're exhausting, we're too much, it's so hard to be around
Right.
us. Like that sort of space is hard for me because I am one. So, and I also really hear a lot of people who I talk to who really want to make sure that people understand the disability aspect of this. So
Hmm.
I can say things all day long about how I'm I'm so grateful that I think differently, that my pattern recognition is something that, should be celebrated, that, you can talk about all of these things, but I also may not be able to call a doctor's office for 6 weeks because it takes that long to talk myself into that one phone call, right?
Right.
So there is a disability nature for sure. I would argue that and maybe that's the wrong word for it. There are challenges for sure. I
Yeah.
guess I would argue that a neurotypical has them too, just in different places. Like they might find those things in those, executive function things incredibly easy, but they're also not going to go create a rocket that we can send to space. So, I guess I wish that we lived in a place, and maybe we'll get there, where instead of putting these labels on everything, which is funny because we've had another episode about labels, that we really just go, the world is full of a lot of variety, and that in itself is okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's in that respect, it is how can we appreciate other people's strengths and what they bring to the table and appreciate those unique qualities. And again, that sentence, it's
Well, I just say that it can be so exhausting to live with us. I mean, I'm
well,
sure that's true. I'm exhausted living with me.
well, no, I am right there with you. So this is
But
we're in Colorado. 2 days ago, it was the coldest day of the year, and I'm like shoveling some snow, and I am at the end of our long walkway, and I'm like, I am so sick of this, how this thing slopes, and I
did you
wanted.
re-slope your driveway?
No, it was a walkway, so it's like
Oh,
through
okay.
our lawn down to the street, and um and this is something that I've wanted to do for months and months and months, like starting last summer. Like I need to redo this little slope. The rocks always come down. And it's just a mess. The coldest day of the year, I decided this is where I'm going to put some steps in. So get these big pieces of flagstone
Great.
and find this other like strip stone to use as little blocks to put the steps on. And I've got this, and then I'm like, well, I got to go to the shed to get this axe to get through some of this ground because it's
Of course.
frozen.
It's frozen.
And these neighbors are looking at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, ADHD got the best of me today, guys. I
No,
can't
but
not
it's the
be
in
doing this.
but I do think that there is something to be said for learning how to work with your energy. And sometimes it's not convenient, but you know what? Because it was cold outside, you may have gotten that task done faster than it was warm. You may have thought it through less and got it done, which is probably what your brain was balking at before. It was that it was just going to take a lot. I mean, like, listen, I think it's revolutionary for those of us who are neurodivergent to be able to do so much on the computer, to not have to make phone calls, to not have to be able to at midnight when you go, oh, I forgot to pay that bill, to be able to just get on and do it. Like, I think for us, there are some real advantages to alternate ways of doing things that have helped us. Um, so you don't know why your brain sparked to it at that moment, but that's okay. I
Right.
mean,
Well, so
people say it's really good for you to be outside in the cold.
I know this neighbor is walking their dog and she goes, I can't even inhale. It's so cold. And I'm like, I'm actually kind of working up a sweat here. And even my dog is sitting there looking at me going, what are you doing? But I was like, I can't stop. I can't stop
Yeah.
it. The train's left the station and I'm doing this thing. And I still have to kind of finish it, which is
Yeah.
another thing.
Oh gosh, that might be harder to do than what you did.
There's some unfinished business out there, and I'm like, this could probably be done a little bit differently. But like, so yeah, the planning piece might not have totally been there, but the to your point, it did get, I kind of let something happen that I've been wanting to have happen. And so if that's like if that would be considered a chaotic behavior or an activity that is exhausting and stressful to other people, I don't know. But I like how you're saying, okay, the way this National Health Service is defining this,
It's clearly
and
a neurotypical who has an ADHDer in their house. And they're
well,
like, oof, it's really hard.
well, so yeah, and it's like, okay, the rest of this little section says, although it can be difficult at times, it's important to remember that a child with ADHD, anyone with ADHD, cannot help it says cannot help their behavior. I mean, I think we've talked in depth about tools and support things that we can use to help harness the creativity and
Well, and I
the
don't know if they're talking about we babes, we chiclets. It's
yeah,
harder for them.
maybe you're
But
right. And then it says like people with ADHD can find it difficult to suppress impulses, which means they may not stop to consider a situation or the consequences before they act. And so that I think there can be pros and cons to that. Like
well,
considering a
yeah.
situation or the consequences before you act, because you could get into analysis paralysis, you could talk yourself out of stuff, um, and therefore never have that experience. Whereas if you are, that impulsivity could really help enhance a lot of life experiences. And that's how before I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was like, I'm just carpe diem. I just go for it. I'm gonna go hit up that next bar because bars are still open. You
Because
know,
they,
and and so and I always just thought I was seizing the day. And then I also realized it was like, okay, well, there are some kind of guardrails you can kind of put on this without, I think, sacrificing um, going after life or um, just taking advantage of a situation that's in front of you rather than, again, letting fear control. Well, that's interesting because it says the impulsive, fearless, and chaotic behaviors.
that's
And I
why I
think
wonder if they're talking
fear
about the
makes people
littles.
stop action. But I think this can apply
Oh, sure.
to
But I
anybody
mean, when
where
you think about you as a child, because I can see it in pictures of my husband, like, right? Like, I can see there's all the family pictures where it's literally like my father-in-law is literally like holding my husband down by his shoulders because Greg is literally in motion at all times. Like, like like he's always a little blurry in every picture. And so that fearlessness, or you look at Cash, my kiddo with ADHD, and at the age of 2, he climbed a ladder to the roof to follow daddy.
wow. Yep.
And I remember like Greg had gone up on the roof, Cash was playing in the backyard. I had walked inside to like grab something. So it wasn't long, but by the time I got out, he was at the rung at the roof. And this kid learned to walk when he was 9 months.
Uh-huh.
So was walking before he had brain ability to know that he was going to fall off ledges.
Oh
So
my
then it
God.
was that really weird thing where you're like panic walking, running to the bottom, going like, "Hey, buddy, hey, what are we
Yeah.
doing?"
Let's
You
not.
know, so that they don't freak out because he's like 18 months old or something like that. And so that type of fearlessness in kids when they are younger, it can be a dangerous piece of the puzzle, right? And then
Mhm.
once they get older and things are, I don't know, it sort of evens out a bit. But the thing that comes to me and the thing that I noticed this week was so different than in the past. Is that I started to name things. So I started to say things like, or we do when we do it with Cash all the time. Like I'll go, so are we having an ADHD moment? Yeah. Are we info dumping right now? I just want to be prepared. Because if I know if we're on a
Wow.
good info dump, I shouldn't really like be super engaged in that because that's not the point of the info dump. The info dump is not to get my opinion. It's to dump information on me. And
Hmm.
so, and he'll go, yeah, I got an info dump. And I'll go, okay, great. And then I just know what's expected of me. Or
Right.
for me, um, I had this experience, which everyone on our team knows, because I just could not post our video last week. I don't know why. My brain said no, which is I think ironic because that was the name of the episode. And I realized that I was in a functional freeze where I was able to do sort of like the bare minimum, but my brain was really shut down. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I had that moment of going like, I think this is what this is, that it started to clear up. Because then
Interesting. Yeah.
I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. So now, and I know why, and I know why it was triggered. And so now I can have grace with myself
Yep.
and come out of it or employ tools. Like sometimes when you're in the woods and you don't know where the light is, you don't even, and you have an axe in your hand, you don't even know how to use the axe, right? Like until you go like, oh, if I cut down some trees, I could see some light. But sometimes when you're in the middle of it and it feels paralyzing, which is the whole point of a freeze, a functional freeze, you don't know what to do. And you may not even know you're truly in it until you sort of look around and go like, oh, I just didn't do like 10 things on my list, you know?
Yeah.
So there was great power this last week in starting to just name the stuff, just to go like,
Mhm.
okay, that's what that thing.
Well, and what's coming up for me, not only how like listening to what you're saying and realizing how effective that is, and but there, when in the child rearing books, I'm sure everybody's familiar with like name it to tame it. When a
Oh yeah.
kid is having a hard time, well, what is scaring you?
Mm,
Let's define this a little more. Let's talk about
yeah.
this so it's not living in your head and getting and expanding and getting out of control. Let's name this thing so we can start kind of making sense of it
Hmm.
and calming you down a little bit. And I think it's the same thing as happening with what you're saying. Um, as far as when we are in the fight, flight, freeze, we're in our sympathetic, the amygdala and stuff. Like, and in a lot of trauma response, you know, we are we are reacting or acting on something that happened so long ago,
Hmm.
but wasn't properly defined or tamed or dealt with. So it's never like sat properly in our bodies, in our brains, in
Well,
our
that's
body.
the thing that was so fascinating about it, Michael, is that once I named it and I really figured it out, I went back in time in my head and in a reflection and saw other times where these things happened.
Mm,
And I would go like, and on the other end of it, I would have had no, and I actually made a post on TikTok where I talked about it, where it's like, there was once where I had a lot of stuff on my plate and I just like skipped a bunch of meetings one day. Like someone's like, you want to go out to dinner? I was like, yeah, let's go. But I had no idea, and I skipped like just a ton of responsibilities. I There was a time where I had been doing a show for it was like a year-long run, and was pretty far in, two-thirds into the run. I just didn't go on for the second act. I don't know why, like just didn't do it. Then there were things like, or I was telling, Laura about, I was supposed to take care of her cat once when I lived in Los Angeles, and I did it for the first half of the week she was gone, and then just completely forgot. And when I look back on those things now, those were freezes.
mm,
When you really think about it, I was overwhelmed in that the first high school experience. So I dumped a bunch of stuff because it was me trying just to get out of the overwhelm of having too much on my plate. The second one where I forgot to go on stage was during finals in college. So I was not only working full time doing, 8 shows a week, but I was also trying to get through college. I had the other one, I had a big thing, it's like, so the pattern is this functional freeze. I did about 8 months worth of branding work with a company who needed to launch and something went wrong and they had to change the branding within 1 week so they could keep their launch. But essentially, launch was something different since the main product had a tech issue that popped up. So I put what took me 8 months of branding work, I had to turn around in a week.
what?
And so when you really think about it, the triggers are all the same. But I have never been able to name it until this one. And I think that's because of this podcast, to be quite
Well,
honest.
Well, it's interesting is I've done um, some EMDR work in therapy where you get this, you do a float back to an instance in your past, and you just really try to stay present to what's coming up, and the therapist is facilitating this whole process. And a lot of times, what will happen is things will start making sense. Like you start just like what you just did, Krista, where you're recalling these instances. It's
Mhm.
almost like because you were able to become self-aware or recognize something or name it to tame it, it's like that disruption that happened where your body and your mind weren't really sure how to file something. It's like a folder's created, and now all that stuff can be put into that folder,
Yeah.
and that part of you can start healing,
Well,
or
and
just
I think
recognizing when it comes up, and you're able to kind of regulate or get through it quicker.
right. And I think that the thing that was really interesting, the aha other thing I had about it for me was that, I look at my oldest who has autism, and I can recognize, when there's a meltdown, which now are not as they're different once you're, I think, older. But when you look at the meltdowns that happened, when they would come out of it, it was like no memory of what happened during that
Sure.
meltdown time, right? And so I was thinking about this functional freeze, and I was like, when you
Interesting.
think about it, I had, I was able to do the bare minimum, get through the things that were, sort of absolutely expected of me. And then whatever that additional thing was, that additional meeting, that additional thought, that additional thing, they just literally were wiped out of my memory. Like when Laura came home from that vacation and said, "Did you not feed my cat for the last couple of days?" I was like, "Oh, like I didn't even think that she was like in my head. It was like she wasn't even at it wasn't like a oh yeah, I'm being a dork. It was literally like it was not there in my brain.
Right. Right.
And so I do think that there are these interesting ideas too around what our brain does, those of us who are neurodivergent, when we're in those spaces. Like when you look at, I'm sure you have recollections of having a space of ADHD sort of mania or hyperfocus or whatever, where you come out of it and you're like, I just have no idea what I said or did during that period of time because I was so in it
Right.
or so whatever. Like, so I find that really fascinating that there are literally like swaths of our brain that just sort of goes like, we're just going to wipe that
Yeah.
clean.
That part is not going to be online for a little while. I mean, and time blindness is another
Oh,
thing. I'm like, there's
totally.
no way it's 2:30.
Yeah.
I haven't eaten lunch. That
I,
happens to me all the
yeah.
time. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, that is interesting. What parts of the brain are just so engaged, so like forcefully engaged to where the other things just go offline.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there are, I don't know, maybe there aren't studies. I would think that there are studies about that. But and then I still think, and do neurotypical people never have this?
Hmm. Well, I think you answered that question earlier, Krista, when you said, I'm sure 88 neurotypical people experience this, but it's not to the point where it's dysregulating,
Mm.
or not to the point where maybe parts of those brain go offline. Um, I
But I
think,
also think it's the rejection. I don't think that neurotypicals have the same level of rejection sensitivity and
no,
sensitiveness as
no,
as us too. So
I
even if
think,
they have those moments, they probably are sort of like, "Meh, whatevs," and they
I think
gloss
you're
over
right.
it.
I think the emotionality is a big distinction. I think we can get really high and really low, and those swings are just we just swing wider emotionally, I think.
Yeah.
And if there's a piece of advice, like as we say, with this in this episode of like, you know there are ways you can define this, or ways you can talk about this that aren't necessarily so negative. You can bring in, the positive aspects to this as well. Um, Another thing would be for like a non-ADHD partner, non-autistic partner, or a neurotypical, you like you did with your with your son. It's like, is this an info dump? Or it's just like making space for something to happen and being accepting of that. It's like, and not and not taking something personally, um, or
Totally. Well,
or
you know that there's that whole thing that they say that when you get with a partner, that the thing that you love about a partner is the same thing that you might hate about them later.
sure, yeah,
It's the light and the dark of something, right? And I would say that most people really love to have their neurodivergent friends because we're way more fun.
right. More likely to say something interesting,
We're gonna be
do
we're gonna
something
be
interesting,
yeah. So I think there
be
is that.
fearless. Yeah,
Um, but I also think that, then it can, sometimes that's tiring. It's tiring to, the fact that it probably takes us
yeah,
3 times longer to process something that happened to us than a neurotypical who's able to let things go is tiring.
right.
I am neurodivergent and I'm married to one. So there are times where and I've got 2 kids who are, and there are certainly times where I will say to one of them, we already did this once. Do we need to talk it through again? Can you go find a friend for that? Because I'm on the autism piece of the puzzle. So but the truth is that it takes us longer sometimes to process those things. So there's a light and dark to it,
Yeah.
but then again, I believe that there's a huge portion of us that have solved the greatest problems of the world.
Yeah, right.
So sometimes the good stuff comes with a little spike of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it could be just be like the way we're processing something. We might hold just a little longer on something, and then a realization can occur or an insight can occur because we're holding on something
Well, and I
those
think
extra couple beats.
we also, I think, have to train ourselves to cut some of that stuff out. Like Greg had a big technical problem at work, came home and much to the way the universe works, had a bit of a technical problem in his home in our studio at home. And literally this morning was just sort of like, I didn't sleep last night. I can't, and I finally was like, listen, I think you should go write a song. Like, let your brain work on the problem in the background,
Sure. Yeah.
because the answer might just be right there, but you're too exhausted and
Yeah,
and
and
and stuck to
exhausted
see it.
and you have probably a higher level of cortisol running through your
Hmm.
system, and so you're not able to think as clearly. I mean, I'll try to be forcing something into the night and refusing to give up. Like I have to figure this out. And finally, just out of sheer exhaustion, I'll go to bed, wake up in the morning, and it'll reveal itself
Yeah.
because
And your brain does work in the background. I mean, it really
yeah,
is. It's like when
yeah.
you think about the computers that we are, our brains work in the background. And it's the same as like saying, hey, I'm going to upload the software over here. And while you're doing that, I'm going to come over here and write a letter, write an email. It's like you've got to let it go. We've got, and I think those are hard. Those things are hard for us as
Well, I
divergent folks
think,
at times.
and I think for me, just pointing out a distinction between what you're saying and getting too many plates spinning, because
Oh,
then you
yeah.
can get into overwhelm. But I like what you're saying. I just wanted to make that distinction. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
like
no, I
go
agree.
start a bunch of projects
Yeah,
and
no.
then this will help itself. What you're saying is like go write a song, go do something, plug into something else, let that thing
Well,
while your
and I
body is kind of calming down.
and I chose something completely different for him, right? It's like you are stuck in a technical spin right now of trying to figure out a problem. Go unhook. And that could look something different for someone else. Go exercise, go take a walk, go do something, go listen to music, go watch a movie, what I think the whole idea is like, go find the piece of joy that you can do. Who cares if you're writing a song to actually write a song that means anything? It's more like changing gears
Yeah.
so that you can let the background, it's like our brains, I'm sorry, well, brains are magical just in general, but I think neurodivergent brains are freaking amazing.
Mhm.
So let them do their job. They say we're only using like what, 6% of our brains or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, trust that your brain's going to take it and do that work in the background. And the best thing you can do for it, and both of us you teach this when we teach applied improv and we go into workplaces and talk about this. But
Mm-hmm.
the best thing that you can do is let your brain unhook and find a little bit of joy, and then let those answers float up to the top.
Yes. I love that. It's, and I think having enough positive experiences using that tool and
Yeah.
philosophy, that will start becoming more ingrained and habitual. Because I think that is a really great kind of awareness to have about, not only how the brain works, but then how the brain works for, a neurodiverse person, and just helping yourself, helping that process rather than stressing it.
Yeah.
When you put in that stress on it, then it's just then you're more likely to go into that dysregulated space.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're giving up. It's just like I like the bike analogy. Switch gears, downshift, whatever, and then let that thing run in the background for a little while.
Well,
And
it's a tool for like, if you're going to stay with the bikes, it's like you've hit a hill.
hmm
You have to switch gears in order to
yeah,
get up the hill, or else or else going up the hill is really hard.
I can't.
That's the whole
Yeah,
point of having the gears,
yeah,
is
right.
to
Yeah,
change them
exactly.
so it makes
You
the hill
have
easier.
gears. You remember you have gears.
Yes, you
Yeah.
have gears. That's right.
Use your
And on that
gears.
and on that
Okay.
note, I think we're done.
So, on that note, thank you for joining us for another episode. So, the sentence, the impulsive, fearless, and chaotic behaviors typical of ADHD can make everyday activities exhausting and stressful. Let's just add in beautiful and wonderful and creative. And yes, it can be exhausting, but it can also be fulfilling and enriching. And we want to make sure to bring some of that positivity, some of that positive language to it as well.
Absolutely.
All
All right.
right.
Thanks,
That
everyone.
that wraps us up. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode of This Is How My Brain Works, please like, subscribe, and share. If you'd like more info on the hosts, guests, and topics, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.